All right, welcome everybody out to the DDD podcast with our new special segment, the Golden Door Deep Dive. We're blessed to have in the studio Mr. Brent Snyder, all the way from Provo, Utah. Dude,
Very far.
how you doing today, dude?
Doing good. Yeah, I had that long drive up from Provo to get up here to Sandy.
Yeah, all 40 minutes.
All 40 minutes. Yes, sir.
I'm sure you listen to a banging podcast or some sort of hype music. What's your typical drive time like?
Oh, man. To be honest, I definitely listen to music probably more than a productive individual should. I go through phases where I'll bust out a lot of audiobooks, and then obviously phases where I do a lot more music. So right now I'm hooked on the music from the musical Six. I was in New York this summer, so saw it on Broadway, and that was fun.
Let's go.
Yep.
Well, dude, now that you brought up the summer, let's jam about this. So, Golden Door winner, is this the first Golden Door? How many?
First Golden Door.
First time Golden Door winner. What was the revenue you brought in? How many accounts did you service? What did that look like?
Yeah, so it was, I think, $667,000 in revenue is what I ended on, and then that was 511 or so accounts.
Okay,
So definitely bumping on the ACV. That was a big help this year.
that's good. What? Speaking to contract value, is this your first year selling high contract, or what did
So
that look like
I've
in
been
previous
working my
years?
way up for a couple of years. So for me, I've been doing this for quite a while now. This was year 9, knocking for me. And so actually for my first 6 years, I had the lowest contract value on my team for like 6 straight years. I always sold really good volume, but contract value wasn't really something I focused on. And that was kind of industry wide for the first couple of years. But finally, I just realized, I'm a really good salesperson. I was like, why couldn't I learn how to sell high contracts? So for the last 3 years in a row now, I've really focused on trying to increase that. And this year, I had a contract value that was about triple what I used to do for my first 6 years.
That's incredible. Well, congrats on that, breaking that limitation.
Thank you.
What would you say to someone that was struggling with that limitation? It's like they can't break past they feel like they're not adding enough value to charge that much money to a customer.
Honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with, your belief in the value that you can provide to the customer. And so sometimes, you have a lot of people that say, oh, well, I don't feel like I'm saving the customer money. Well, the goal isn't to save the customer money, it's to provide value for them. So that could be that they don't want to take the time to figure out how to do it on their own. Maybe they can't get as good of a solution as you can do for them. Maybe it's a safety thing or a products thing. And so your job as the salesperson is to figure out how you can provide the value that the customer wants and to make sure you deliver it. As long as you're delivering good value and the customer's happy with the price, then it's a win-win for both people.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people miss the essence of that, like the win-win mentality, because if you always are taking losses and doing favors for the customer, I guess, quote unquote, the biggest favor you can do for the customer is create a scenario in which you both win.
Yeah.
And I think that's a powerful mindset. So we kind of dove right into the meat and potatoes of it, which is fun. But I also, 9 years in the industry, let's jam on that. What got you into door-to-door?
So my original story, so I was a senior in high school. This was back in 2012, so I'm 28 now. And my uncle, who lived down in Houston, Texas, was in the same church congregation as a guy that owned a really small pest control company called Splat. So it's been a long time. That company's not
That's a
around
great
anymore.
name.
I know, right? I had actually never worked a job ever before up to that point. My parents covered my costs while I was growing up as long as I got good grades in school. And so I had a summer in between senior year of high school, freshman year of college. I even had a full ride scholarship to University of Kentucky that fall, so I didn't even need the money. But I've always been the kind of person that was always really driven. So I was like, you see the pay scales,
Yeah.
you're 17. I wasn't at all familiar with the door-to-door space. So I was like, cool, it looks like a lot of money. Like, why not? I'll just give it a whirl. So yeah, I showed up, and that first summer was rough. I was actually the worst sales rep on my team for the first month, doing like 1 or 2 deals a week. Yeah, so we're pretty bad. Finally got things to start clicking, and ended pretty strong that summer. Took a couple years off, went on my mission trip to Brazil for my church. And then when I got back from that, wasn't planning on doing it again, But then somebody in my church congregation found out I'd sold before. He was the branch manager of a different company, also pest control, and he wanted me to give it another shot. So I did, and did pretty good. And so that was like my breakout summer, if you will, where I finally made. I think I made like $43,000, like what I consider to be like my first true summer with a real company. And then from there, yeah, just kind of fell in love with the process of just continually improving and pushing myself and being competitive. And yeah, still here.
And here we are 9 years later.
9 years later.
So speak to me on that first summer where you're selling 1 to 2 deals a week.
Yeah.
Versus the second summer. What was the mindset shift that you had?
So really where it kind of happened was one day I went out and I don't know that I recommend this for like everyone who's trying to do really big numbers, especially experienced reps, but I think for first year reps it can be helpful. Is I got to that mindset where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to focus on meeting cool people and having fun and staying relaxed and trying to help people solve their problem. Right? And so it was really more of that focus of just like being relaxed and trying to help people. And while that did end up with me maybe spending a lot of time with certain people that were bad prospects, what it allowed me to do was actually have more confidence when I was talking to people. And I think that they could see that I was more relaxed, that I was more confident, that I cared more about what the person wanted, the customer. And yeah, just started popping off. I started doing like 3 or 4 deals a day after doing like 1 or 2 deals a week. So that was a huge shift. It was almost an overnight switch.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it shifted from customers answering the door and being like, oh, another sales
guy,
to, oh, it's actually like a cool guy.
Yeah.
And you actually did care about them, which in turn, you transferred that energy to them, which made them more
inclined to buy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a pretty big shift. So, okay, now fast forward 9 years later, what's kept you in the industry?
So honestly, a big part of it is that feeling I was talking about, that I started falling in love with the chase of that feeling of continual improvement. Always that thought of like, could I do better than I did this summer? Yeah. Okay, great. I want to do that then. Like I want to get better. And you start chasing that. It stops becoming as much about the money, obviously, and becomes more of chasing new milestones. I love that feeling of achieving something new. And so every year I had a new goal that I went into the summer with, and, trying to chase PRs, daily PRs, weekly PRs, best month, all that good stuff. And so that's kept me in it personally. And then I'm pretty involved in the management side of things now. I'm a divisional manager at Aptiv. And so helping my reps succeed and have that success, one thing I take a lot of pride on is helping my reps have success way faster than I was able to have success. Because for me, it took a long time, a lot of hard lessons learned, multiple company switches before I found a spot that I really enjoyed. And so for my reps, trying to accelerate that process for them.
Yeah, cut out the dummy tax.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, hey, it took me years to learn what I'm teaching you right now, which could take you a day to learn this.
Yep.
In a sense.
Yep.
Which is powerful, which sometimes, sometimes we do need that dummy tax, though, because we need that experience in order to empathize with other people. We need the struggle so we can look at one of our reps and be like, oh, yeah, I've been in your shoes.
Yep.
I've sold 1 a week.
Yep.
I've struggled to make money, but then when the mindset becomes like, oh, well, like, let's like accelerate your learning, then that's the ultimate win-win between rep and manager, I believe.
Yep, exactly. Helping them get there a little faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first golden door, what's been the process to get you here?
So this sounds really cliche, but I had to learn about myself and what some of my strengths are, what some of my weaknesses are. I think a big part of hitting the big numbers is really honing in on your strengths and playing to those. So for example, I'll just give you one example, which we can dive in more on this later, but I'm just not a morning person, right? I'm just not. You probably already interviewed for this podcast a bunch of people that come in and like, yeah, I wake up at 4 or 5 a.m. or whatever, get 4 hours of sleep, and that's just how I roll. And I think that's great. I
Jump
think,
at the cold plunge.
and for those people, that's their strength. But for me, that never has been. And so like every year, I always tried to do like that super aggressive morning routine, like wake up early. And what it does is if you aren't able to execute on that, you start to create a pattern of losses instead of wins. And so I was like, okay, I'm not a morning person. I'm going to wake up at 8 a.m. every day in time for my 9 a.m. morning meeting with my team. 1 hour, right? So nothing crazy. Give me a little bit of time to get ready, spend some time with my kids. I'm married and have 2 kids, and so that's important to me. And so starting off on that right foot of, spending time with my kids and running a good morning meeting, I think are like my wins for the morning instead of like waking up at, 4 a.m. and running a half marathon every morning or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
Which, that sounds really judgy. No judgment to people who can do that. I've always been jealous of the people that can do the hardcore morning routine.
And it's the principle behind it. It's the guys waking up, doing the full morning routine. Yeah. It's just they're stacking their wins.
Stacking their wins. And so for me, I think for anyone, you need to stack your wins. But know which wins you're going to be able to stack and stack those wins that are stackable. And
recognize them too. It's like if it's a win for you to spend time with your wife and kids, then recognize that.
Yep. So that was huge. Like another thing I did this year that was a little bit different is I gave myself as much runway as possible. So for Aptive this year, we started like our more official preseason. I think it was on April 1st. So I started on like April 5th, pretty close to the beginning. And I gave myself all the way up until the end of September if I needed to. Which I ended up hitting my goal earlier than that by more than an entire month earlier. I got my Golden Door on August 24th, so Mamba Day for all you Kobe Bryant fans out there. But knowing I had all that additional runway and like looking at the numbers and knowing that they were numbers that I was capable of doing, that gave me a lot of confidence to be able to hit my goal. And because I wasn't super stressed out about my ability to hit the goal, I knew I could do it. That allowed me to be more relaxed, go in with more confidence each day. And then when I was selling with more confidence and more relaxation, I was actually able to get to my goal way faster.
That's amazing. What would you say is the key to selling big numbers?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I don't know that I'm necessarily the right guy to ask about that. Like my best ever summer volume-wise was this summer doing 510 or so deals. For me, though, I think capitalizing on your big days is really important. I think you see a lot of those reps that come in with like 200, 300 accounts. What they do is on those days that they're selling well, they let their foot off the gas. And then, those are their days that turn into like 5s and 6s. Whereas the big baller reps, and I think any baller rep would agree on this, is that when you're having one of those days that you're just in the zone, you're in that flow state, like you better turn that day into 12 or 14 or 15 deals. Because if you let your foot off on 7, you're going to have a day where you're having 1 or 2 or 3 deals, and you got to have those huge days to make up for those days that it's just not clicking as well. And so I think that that's huge, just keeping your foot on the gas on the big days. People always talk about keeping your foot on the gas on the small days. Like, yeah, you want to do that and put in the time, but the big days is where you're going to really make up the ground towards your goal.
Absolutely, because we've all been in that boat where we do the victory lap. It's like we hit a certain number on the day, and it's like, oh, I've totally earned a gas station run. I've totally earned going home early. I've totally earned this, but...
Or I'm going to call somebody that I know I don't normally call during the day because I know it turns into a 20-minute phone call. Like, yeah, we all have those, right?
Mom, hey!
Hey, I just had a huge day. What have you been up to? Like, Well, and then you run the risk, too, of the victory lap turning into 2 or 3 days sometimes, too. Once again, you see the reps that are... like those mid-level performers, not low performers, but like the guys doing 200-300 accounts that are really solid. That next day they're doing like 1 or 2 deals because they're like, I just did 10 yesterday. Like I can just kind of take a day off. You don't really want to take a day off when you're like pushing for a really big number. Doesn't mean you don't want to have time to decompress, relax, and recharge, but you don't want to be like out there but not out there on the next day.
How does one like in your opinion overcome that? It's like they had a big day and then they want to be lazy the next day.
Well, that's where that process orientation really comes into play. You hear people talk about being process oriented. Like on that next day after a big day, you might not feel that same drive that maybe you felt that previous day, but at least make sure that you're going out there, you're working the hours, you're trying to get all of your decision makers that you need to be getting in order to hit your goals. Keep your pitch tight, right? Make sure that you're staying locked in and focused instead of zoning off. And as long as you follow your process, if you're a skilled rep, you're going to get sales. Then once those sales start to stack, you'll get the excitement coming back again, and then foot down on the gas, turn it into another big day.
Absolutely. Because I think, momentum is such a big key to this too. What is your advice to someone maybe that's new on how you get momentum?
Yeah, so if you're new trying to get momentum, that's a good question. I think that one thing I tell my reps is like take the interactions that are good that maybe don't result in sales and make sure you celebrate those a little bit and start using those as wins, right? To start stacking. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to wait until you get your first sale before you start like having momentum, right? Go out there and like deliver a great sales pitch, and that right there can be your first win, right? Maybe the person didn't buy. Maybe the person didn't even listen to you. Maybe you weren't able to get past their smoke screen, but at least deliver whatever your normal responses are to get through that smoke screen. And if you do it with good body language, good paraverbals, you can have that be a win. So start stacking your wins of like, how good am I doing on delivering my sales pitch to the best of my ability? That'll inevitably turn into sales, and then you can start using those sales as wins to build your momentum.
Absolutely. Next piece I kind of want to go into, you mentioned you're a father of 2 kids, right?
Yeah.
And you're happily married. How do you balance that?
That is one of the most difficult things that I've had to do over the last couple of years. Yeah, every once in a while, I'll envy some of those guys that, maybe are still single.
The bachelors out
Yeah,
knocking.
like being a bachelor, like it has some advantages when it comes to being able to have those really aggressive routines and the crazy hours. But, that's not the hand I have. And obviously, I love my wife and my 2 kids. I'm super grateful to have them. And my wife has been a huge support and a huge help to me. But yeah, as far as balancing that, I think the first thing is just having alignment with your spouse. And what I mean by alignment is you want to make those goals together, whatever you're going to try and accomplish as a couple. So that way you're both willing to, well, not both willing, but both agreed on being willing to sacrifice to hit whatever goal that you decide on together. And so that was like really poorly worded right there. But basically, if you have a goal that you want to get after as a sales rep or as a team leader, make sure your spouse is on board with that too, and make sure it makes sense for them as well. Sometimes that's as simple as just explaining the why. And so like, you could kind of like compare that to, when you're on a door with somebody, just explaining the benefit of having the service or whatever. So like with your wife, like, hey, here's how it'll benefit us to hit, XYZ goal for me personally, for our family, for our future, whatever it might be. Sometimes it might be an actual incentive. You're looking at like a price drop if you're with a customer, right? Sometimes it might be like, hey, like if I can hit this goal, like, we'll go on a trip, just the 2 of us, like to Europe or whatever, just a one-on-one trip. Or maybe it's, a new car for your wife or whatever the case might be. Having alignment, though, it's almost impossible to overstate the importance of that. If you're not aligned with your spouse on your goals, like you're probably not going to hit your goals. So if it means that you have to tell your wife you're going to buy her a new car at the end of the summer, it's probably worth it, especially if you're going after a big goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it really is like the golden question of every married door-to-door rep is like, how do I keep everyone happy? And, honestly, you're not going to keep everyone happy. But again, like what you said, it's like if we align visions and if we set those goals together, then you're setting yourself up for that success down the road where it's going to get hard still, but now you have that to fall back on.
Yep, exactly. And then as far as like with my kids, I think that I made sure I spent a couple of minutes with them each morning. We had our morning routine that we did as a family, as far as spending time together. And then I didn't see them in the evenings ever. They were already always asleep by the time I got home. But then on the weekends, Sunday, I was pretty disciplined on making sure that I didn't let work totally consume my Sundays. And once again, that's going to be a difference between some people. Like, I don't think that that's the right solution for everybody. Some people are really big on like, oh, I just need a ton of me time to like write out all my goals on Sundays. And if that's the case, great. For me, I found that part of that balance, I had to make sure I gave some time to my wife and kids on Sunday. Got a little bit of me time maybe to, relook at my goals, but that allowed me to recharge and go into the next week with confidence that me and my wife were aligned. And as we all know in sales, confidence is key. If you know that you're going into that week and your wife and your family are behind you, you're going to work with a lot more confidence. You're going to work with a lot more positivity, and you're probably going to get better results.
Absolutely. Now let's look into summer 2023, Long Island, New York.
Yes, sir.
Dude, tell me about Long Island.
Dude, Long Island was a different beast. I'd never sold in the Northeast before. I'd done Midwest, South. I did Phoenix one time, that's an interesting one as well. But yeah, Long Island. So first got out there, you hear all the horror stories about like how rude and abrupt everybody is. I actually really enjoyed working in the Northeast. Yeah, people are a little bit short, but they're a lot more, to the point. As long as you're able to create good value and not let them push you around, people are definitely willing to buy out there. So a lot of mosquitoes out there, which was great. We had a mosquito package, and so that got me a lot of sales for sure.
Nice.
Yeah. But that was Long Island, I guess.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are afraid of like the like really short, rude guy. They're like, "Hey, I'm walking here," the classic New Yorker.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, hey, if you got something that's worth selling to people, and people listen, and the people that actually listen in environments like that, they're more inclined to buy.
Yeah.
So
you had to just show them that you were the boss, right? Like, you had to just show them that you're not going to back down. You're not going to, run away with your tail between your legs, that you're like there for a reason. And then, as long as the value adds there, like they're happy to buy, and they'll buy at pretty good prices too, because they're used to paying good money for things out there.
For sure. How was like the market saturation there? Was a lot of other pest control companies, or what did that look like?
It wasn't too bad. There were 2 other door-to-door pest control companies, just like pretty much everywhere in the country right now. A lot of solar companies knocking. We had actually multiple like phone company, cable internet company type deals going around, so that was a little bit different. As far as the actual like saturation of just pest control in general, it wasn't too bad. Kind of your typical like 20 to 40% of people probably had companies, depending on the neighborhood, how high end it was. One thing that was different, a lot of landscaping companies out there. People are like, oh yeah, my gardener does it, which I never heard anyone ever say my gardener does it until I got to New York. So that was interesting.
Yeah, what's the rebuttal to that?
I mean, the rebuttal is like, yeah, your gardener's a gardener, right? Like, he's not a pest control guy. So you just show them like all the things that you can do that are a lot more intensive than just mixing in a granule when you're, fertilizing the yard. So, but
nice. Again, it's you're the expert.
Yeah, and the reality is, some people though, they didn't care, they didn't want to listen, and I think obviously anyone who's thrown down good numbers knows like you're not going to sell everybody. Some people are just bad prospects, and so a lot of those gardener types, those were the people I was just walking away from.
Yeah.
So throw out my hook, see if I can get them to buy it on listening to me, and if I couldn't, then just moving on to the next door.
For sure. So in Long Island, obviously going into it, I'm sure there were things that went wrong, failures along the way. How did you manage those failures and those hard moments?
Yeah, one thing I was like, I guess just addressing the failures in general. I think once again it goes back to giving myself as much runway as possible. I knew that if I had a week or two that were down, like I still had plenty of time to hit my goal. So that was big. I'm really big on tournaments and competitions as well. Like I go crazy during competitions. And so I knew that the competitions were more towards the end of the summer. That also gave me a little bit of like, it kept me from hitting the panic button at the beginning stage of the summer. So I was like, well, I usually sell tons of deals during competitions anyway. So like I'll be able to make this up. But then, problem solving was big. Like, going back, talking to my other team leaders that were out there with me, troubleshooting some things, coming up with solutions, to like, for example, when we first got out there, it was freezing cold. That was difficult. I had multiple weeks at the beginning of the summer where I was having to wear like 2 layers of thermals,
Mm-hmm.
2 shirts, 2 jackets. Like, I mean, it was crazy. Like gloves with the fingers cut out so I could still do my iPad. So I was everyone and their dog was saying like, "Oh, we never see any bugs. Like it's winter still." So that was challenging. But yeah, just I had a lot of faith in my ability to problem solve that. I had a lot of faith in my team leaders and our ability to come up with good solutions together. And then, yeah, once we started clicking and figured out the market, it was just off to the races.
That's awesome. Yeah, because a lot of people, they get revved up, they have a big goal, but then when, Stephen Covey talks about this, when stimulus comes, when an event happens, they don't know how to respond. So, it's powerful to have that kind of backup.
Yeah.
And, you had like your leadership to rely on. You had just like kind of the knowledge that, hey, like, you gave yourself a little bit of a buffer if things didn't work out for a little while. I did kind of want to speak to that because I feel like a lot of people, they can use that in the wrong way. Like if they give themselves is that they have an extra month that they're out
Yeah.
selling, they'll be like, oh, well, like it's okay because I got an extra month and I'll be okay. How do you use that more as like a leverage point to help you succeed rather than an excuse to not work?
That is actually a really good question. And that actually almost got me a little bit towards the end of the summer. I could have actually hit my golden door probably a week and a half earlier than I did. But after our tournaments ended, I was so close to hitting golden door. And I had so many weeks left that I had my 2 worst weeks of the entire summer back to back. On the week before, I was finally like, okay, this is ridiculous, and went out and got my golden door. Right. And so, yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that each day you have to go at it with the intensity that you have to have a big day, or like not have to have a big day, because I don't like that language, but um, you want to capitalize on every day, I
Mm-hmm.
guess is what I mean to say by that. Like you
Like
don't,
you have a standard.
yeah, a standard of your inputs and your process that you're going to follow. I remember at the beginning of the summer when I wasn't on pace, I had to make a couple adjustments. One of them was I was working full day Saturdays, which I know that a lot of people in the industry do that anyway. That was new to me. But I was knocking like, yeah, 8:30 in the morning on Saturdays until like 9 at night. So putting in like those 12-hour days on Saturdays. Um, to kind of make up for the fact that I wasn't really where I wanted to be yet. And I actually had 2 of my 3 biggest days of the whole summer were 2 of my Saturdays during my first month. Like just huge days on
Mm-hmm.
Saturdays, and that was awesome. The other, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought here. What was the other adjustment that I made? Can't remember. I was literally right about to say something about that.
The universe isn't ready, guys.
It's not ready. We'll get back to
You
it.
guys aren't ready for it.
Yep, not yet.
We'll receive it soon. But yeah, I do see that a little too frequently, though, where it's like they lose their sense of urgency. But
Oh, I remembered. Okay. So the other thing with me too is this was where I started to throw down those big numbers because I don't know that I was having that complacency of like, oh, I have tons and tons of time. A little bit of that, but definitely a little bit of like, gosh, like I'm not really on track. I have a ton of months left, but if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm still not going to get there. But going back to capitalizing on your strengths, like you hear a lot of guys that talk about like, oh, I never look at the leaderboard. Like I just
mhm.
focus on me because I can't control those other guys. That is true. For me, one of my strengths though is I am hyper competitive. And so yeah, even though I couldn't control what anybody else did, I knew that on a good day, I'm capable of being in the top 5 or 10 every day. And so that became one of my new goals because I finally started looking at the leaderboard and I was like, dude, this is ridiculous. At one point, halfway, or it was probably like May 20th, I was number 56 and just active alone, like number 56. And I was like, dude, I'm not going to hit a golden door doing this, right? Because like at that point, I was probably on pace to like 350 or 400K, which is still a good summer, but
Mhm.
not anywhere close to what I wanted. So I was like, you know what? No, like I am capable of being in the top 10 every day. So that's my new goal. I'm going to go out and I'm going to work with urgency to accomplish my daily goal of trying to be in the top 10. I wasn't in the top 10 every day, but I was pretty close most days. And
Mhm.
I started shooting up the leaderboards to by about a month later, I think I was number 4 or number 3. I got
Mhm.
all the way up to like I never got to number one. Jake West was always number one. But I got all the way up to, I think, actually number two at one point doing that strategy. And then I had a couple other guys that ended up passing me by the end of the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So that was how I kept that urgency of having that daily goal, but then also knowing that like I did have a little bit of that safety net if I needed it.
For sure. And that's a great answer. What would you say to someone that they want to create that identity of a golden door, but they just can't seem to have that self-belief? They can't tap into that power.
So I think coaching is huge. I'm a huge proponent of having a coach. I mean, it's impossible to like overstate the importance of having somebody that's there to help you break through those mental barriers, right? And so like my coach, his name's Nate Harris. I was introduced to him through Aptiv, and he does coaching with a couple of the other like top executives at Aptiv. And just an absolute game changer. Like shout out to Kirk Williams, who's the dad of Chase Williams, who's one of the presidents of sales at Aptiv as well. I did coaching with him for 2.5 years. Shout out to Corey, the sales therapist. I did coaching with him this summer.
Love Corey.
Like, yeah, Corey's awesome. But I had both Corey doing my like more like therapy, mental stuff, and then I had my coach Nate that was helping me just as like a paradigm shifter. And so, yeah, I think that's huge. Like you have to develop that belief that you can do it. And sometimes you're not gonna be able to do it just on your own. In fact, I think you're never able to do it just on your own. You have to go out and help. You have to have people that are gonna help you break through those barriers. Mm-hmm. Audiobooks are huge. I went through a couple of years where I was just busting out the audiobooks like crazy. I don't do it as much as I used to, but at one point I was probably doing like 25 to 30 books a year for a couple of years. And I think audiobooks are great at working on your subconscious. You see a lot of people that are like, oh, well, I don't listen to audiobooks because I never apply anything. I'm like, okay, well, are you doing any books? Oh, well, no, because I just want to make sure that I'm applying stuff. Okay, well, listening to 10 books is better than reading one book. In my opinion, you get guys like, oh, no, I just want to make sure I'm applying everything, but then they never actually do it. So audiobooks are great for working on your subconscious. Even if you only retain 10 to 20% of the info, that's still 10 to 20% more than if you would have gotten if you did nothing. So audiobooks, subconscious, and then I think coaching allows you to pull the new like world view out of your subconscious from the audiobooks and then turn it into action and conscious thought. So it's kind of like that two-pronged approach to changing your mental game.
It's powerful. I don't remember exactly who said this, but I think it was one of the old authors, like Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of those guys. Yeah. Basically, they were like, how many books have you read? Or like, what's been your favorite? And he basically was like, I don't remember any of the books I've read. Like, I scarcely can remember any of the books I've read, like the food I've eaten, but I know they've turned me into who I am today.
And I would say that exact thing, like for me personally.
And I think it's a powerful principle. We do get caught up in like, oh, well, like I need to like write down every little principle point.
I need to annotate it and have a hard copy. And like
sometimes you do need to do that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times it's like, especially if you're really just starting on shifting your mindset into becoming a winner, like sometimes you do need that.
Yeah.
That constant flow, that constant exposure of just like new ideas. Because like you said, it transplants into your subconscious.
Yep. Well, it goes back to this thing that I heard back in, it was probably like middle school. Like they had somebody come in and talk about physical activity, and like somebody asked, well, what's the best kind of exercise to do? Or maybe it was high school. And the person said, the best kind of exercise is whichever kind you're going to do. So in a vacuum, is running better than walking for exercise? Probably, yeah. But if you're never going to run, but you would walk, walking is better for you, right? Because you're actually going to do it. And so it's the same thing with self-improvement. It's the same thing with developing your mindset. It's the same thing with habits during the summer. The same thing with strategies on the doors with actual sales pitch stuff. Like whatever you're going to do is going to be what's going to get you the fastest towards your goal, right? So like if you're going to listen to audiobooks where you wouldn't read a hard copy book, then an audiobook for you is going to be better. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't mean you can't improve over time to then get to where you're like reading more hard copies, more note-taking, improving those habits. I say I'm not a morning person. Would I like to someday become a morning person? Yeah. but this summer wasn't the year to just all of a sudden be like, well, I'm just going to start waking up at 4 a.m. every day right now. It's too much at once.
Yeah, for sure.
Got to work from where you're at.
Totally. And I think, things like audiobooks, especially for like new reps, it's very low hanging fruit. It's like a subscription to Audible is like $16 a month.
Yep.
You can't not afford to have something like that. But now kind of moving into the advanced psychology of mentorship and having coaching, it costs money to have people.
A lot of money. Good coaches are expensive, and they should be.
Yeah, it costs money to get DDDU. It costs money to have good training. But what's the value of that to you?
I think it allows me to do something I wouldn't do on my own. So the value is almost infinite, right? Because if I couldn't get there on my own and the only way I can get there is with someone else, then that value adds huge, right? So like one of my favorite things that Nate asks me is he says, well, let's examine that. Or he says, let's examine that. Because he'll say, he'll ask me like what's going on in my life. And then I'll say, yeah, I'm going through this, this, and this. And he's like, okay, well, why do you think that's happening? I'll say this. He's like, well, let's examine that. So instead of just me thinking about why I'm doing things a certain way, we examine my thought about why I'm doing it that way. Because, you find biases like in your thinking, and you find fallacies in your thinking if you really take the time to examine it. But you're not going to be able to examine it clearly on your own because you're, by definition, are biased. Any thought about you're going to be biased about it. So
absolutely. And it's interesting to see how, it's so important to have someone that's on like a third party that can view things objectively, their ears to the ground, they know how to talk to you.
Yep.
But
no skin in the game.
Exactly. A lot of people are afraid to make investments like that, though. What would you say to someone they're too afraid to make an investment on themselves?
I mean, if you're already successful in the space, I would say you already make enough money that it's worth like trying it, right? You have enough disposable income that like, why not? But even if you're new to the space, like I think you just have to trust. Every high level performer in any industry is going to tell you that mentors are important. So maybe the word you hear more frequently is mentor over coach, I think, just in the general business realm. But anyone who's successful will tell you that they've had mentors along the way. And if every single successful person has had mentors, there's probably a reason for that. Yeah. So just trust the results that came before, like, I think is a big one.
Totally, man. So we're kind of going to be wrapping up here on time, but let's talk about DDDCon real quick.
Okay.
Is this going to be your first DDDCon?
It will. I'm almost always on active trips during DDDCon, but this year I won't be. I will be
You're going to be on stage. Let's go.
Yeah,
it always drives us nuts when people are like, oh, like we got blitz trips, we got home openers. I'm like, everyone in this industry should freaking be at this thing.
I know. I wanted to go for a couple of years. 1 or 2 years, I fell into that trap of saying like, I don't know if I have enough money for it. Didn't invest in myself. And then a couple of years I was on trips.
Yeah. What are you most looking forward to DDDCon this year?
Since I've never been, it's hard for me to know exactly what I'm looking forward to. I think just the environment I think is going to be huge. Like everybody there is by definition a high performer. Either like not everyone who's there is a Golden Door winner, but everyone who's there is there to improve and get better because they're hungry and they're driven and they want to improve. Like why wouldn't you want to be around a group of thousands of people that are in that same mindset? So I'm excited just for that energy, and obviously the speakers every year are top notch. So. Excited for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, January 25th through the 27th, going to be very important. Get your tickets as soon as you can. They're going to be going up soon. But it's such a cool place that we can all like just come together as like one tribe. It's like we take off the active hat, we take off the Vivint hat, we take off the grit hat, and we're just in this weird journey together of like, oh, hey, we all knock doors, we make an unusual amount of money doing it, and we're all like unusually obsessed with personal development. Like let's just like jam on that. And let's like share this common ground. So it'll be exciting to have you on stage. We're extremely looking forward to it. We're excited to see you bring some of your guys as well to DDDCon. We're excited to have them on stage next year. So any last parting words, any last pieces of advice that you want to give the industry before we let you go?
Words for the entire industry, huh?
Yeah.
I guess never get complacent is probably the biggest thing. Like for me, this is year number 9. I mean, how many people have you interviewed that got their first golden door on year 9?
Not a ton.
Not a ton, probably very few, maybe none. But I guess my point is like, yeah, don't be complacent. There's always room to grow. There's always room to improve. If you haven't been to D2D Con, go. If you haven't, invested in a coach or a mentor, do it. Like if you haven't developed a habit of self-improvement through reading and audiobooks, try it. Like why not? Don't be complacent. I think you'll be surprised where you can get to.
Awesome. Well, everyone, I hope you all got a lot out of that, took some good notes. This has been the Golden Door Deep Dive section. We'll see you next time.